Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Should treat your employees a bit nicer or it could really end up costing you." Back when I was in college, I used to wait tables to pay the bills. I worked at a high-end restaurant in the downtown area serving both lunch and dinner, but dinner service was where the bulk of my income came from. Because most of the hostesses were in high school, the managers asked servers to volunteer to host for lunch service, which I volunteered to do 1 day a week. The shift was always shown on our server schedule. One day I came home in the afternoon and had messages on my answering machine from my frantic 19-year-old manager asking where I was and saying I was scheduled to hostess. I was surprised because I swore I wasn't scheduled, and since it was after lunch service I went in for my dinner shift as scheduled. When I got there, I confirmed I didn't have a shift marked on the regular schedule, but someone pointed out since it was summer and high school was out, the manager created a separate schedule for hostesses and I was scheduled there. I talked to a manager and explained what happened, but they sent me home from working my dinner shift anyhow. Angry that I was punished something I didn't feel was my fault, and because I was actually volunteering to help out, I took a note to the office the next day saying that since I was not hired to work as a hostess and it was now affecting my income as a server, I did not agree to work any more hostess shifts. Well, turned out, they had me scheduled on a second hostess shift that week, which again, I did not know about and didn't show up for. Sure enough, they fired me, and it was only a couple weeks before I was about to leave on a long summer trip overseas. Since I had heard from people in town that the tip-out policy for the restaurant requiring us to tip 5% of our tips to the kitchen staff was illegal, I did some research. Found out it was, and made a trip to the labor board with a copy of an employee handbook and filed a complaint. Took them a while to go in and investigate, but about a year later, I got a check for $2,000 they had to reimburse me for those tip-outs, and found out it cost them a total of over $500,000 to reimburse all the restaurant's employees. They have to go back 2 years from the time they go in and investigate, and paid a ton of fines. The bonus on top of it all was it turned out they had underage migrants washing dishes when the investigators went in, so they got hit with additional violations for that. The next one is titled, "With apologies to anyone who sews." I was raised by my abusive grandparents. My grandfather isn't worth mentioning, and my grandmother died when I was 15. She had an aneurysm while on the toilet, dying with the same grace she had while alive. I'm in my mid-30s now, and I don't often think of her, but I do keep one small petty habit. Grandmother was a seamstress, and her most prized possession was a pair of super sharp, fancy expensive dressmaking shears. I once used them to cut paper, and she made me sleep on the porch for a week. For those who have said this seems like a random punishment, she was abusive. If I was going to be an animal, then I should be treated like one, and sleep outside. It wasn't about the scissors, it was about me existing in her line of sight when she wanted to lash out. When she died, one of the few things I asked for were those scissors. I have used them to cut everything but fabric for the last 2 decades. I ruined them in the kitchen, for crafts, for projects around the house. The other day I used them as a hammer when I was too lazy to grab the toolbox. It's stupid and petty, but nothing beats the tiny spark of malicious glee that I feel every time I use those fucking scissors to cut duct tape and then pry open a paint can. Here's to you, Nana. I hope you went to heaven, because I know there's nothing you hated more than the happiness of others. The next one is titled, "Steal My Parking Spot?" That just cost you $20. Back in the late 90s, I was at my local shopping center, patiently waiting for a parking space with my indicator on. I was in the parking aisle facing the shopping center, and the car backing out of the space I was waiting for was near the front. They were backing out slowly, I was waiting patiently, and the moment that they stopped reversing but hadn't pulled forward yet, a Miata came racing past their front bumper and parked in my spot. There were 2 20-something guys in the Miata, and they just laughed and walked away when I told them I had been waiting for that spot. Whatever, I went ahead and looped to the very back of the aisle and found a spot pretty quickly, something I regularly do now. On my way past the Miata, I see a folded $20 bill on the ground. My lucky day. I was a teenager, so that was a lot of money for me. I only made about $5 per hour at the time. Just as I was putting the bill in my pocket, I saw one of the Miata guys come popping out of the Seattle-based coffee shop looking frantically for his lost money. Now I didn't see the Miata guy drop the $20, but you wouldn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to deduce that it was his. I walked right by him with a smirk. Any other time I would have absolutely offered the found money to someone obviously looking for it. The next on is titled, The Flight from H.L. Even? This is not my own story, but my dad's during his travel from Florida to New York. My father prefers to arrive on time in anything in life. He's a stickler for that kind of thing. So to my amazement when he told me this awesome story of how he sought revenge, although indirectly, I was grinning ear to ear while listening. Of course my father arrives on time to his flight. At boarding time the plane was a bit empty, something like 2 or 3 rows was empty in the very back, and my father loves to sit in the back because it's less stressful and proven to be safer in the event a plane crashes. So there is freedom to choose the seat you want, and my father does so. Bags put in the overhead compartment, empty seats on either side of him, and life is bliss. That is until the plane is delayed. A minor inconvenience, but nothing too detrimental. 5 minutes pass delayed, then 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. Everyone on the plane is wondering why this damn plane won't take off. And then it happens, a family of 5, which we'll call the anuses, father, mother, 2 sons and an infant, board the plane. If you've ever rode on a plane before, you'll understand that this is almost unthinkable. Planes love to take off on time, and if you're even 5 minutes late you will not be able to board said plane. So here goes the anuses boarding a plane 30 minutes after it's supposed to have taken off. No problem. There are plenty of empty seats and we can finally get rolling. Nope. The anuses walk directly to my father and the row he's sitting in and says, "These are our seats." Well, of course my father proclaims that there are a multitude of empty seats and they can just take one of those. Nope. They want their seats on their tickets and wasn't having it any other way. Another thing about planes. It is federal law that all passengers must sit in their assigned seats in the case of a plane crash. All the bodies can be accounted for and identified. Although it's not enforced that much. The anuses must have their seats, so they call over a flight attendant, now FA, and explain their situation. The FA sides with them, quoting the law and how my father must relocate. Having lost, my father then gets up, collects his belongings and proceeds to move to another seat. The seat he chose? His seat on his ticket, which is about 5 rows up and a middle seat. Only problem is, there is already someone sitting there. He tells the guy that it's his seat and he'd like to sit there now. The guy looks baffled when FA chimes in and says, "Sir, there are open seats in the back, why don't you just take one of those?" The hell? Obviously outraged at this point, my father then says, "But you just told me to move out of my seat because it was theirs when there was also many seats available. Now when I do the same there's a problem." FA just says the same spiel again, but my father doesn't relent, he wants his seat now. He recites the very law she used against him. FA defeated, then asks the guy to relocate as well. This causes a domino effect and the guy goes to his assigned seat and asks to sit there, so on so forth until the entire plane has been rearranged, and this plane is now an hour and a half behind departure schedule. The delay in the flight now sets off some red alerts for airport security and the higher-ups at this terminal, JetBlue I believe. Airport police, upper management and God knows who else are now at the terminal gate to inquire as to why this plane is still here. They board the plane to talk to the pilot about the delay and he says that he held the plane to let some late passengers on board. Now that's against policy, because as stated before they like planes to be on time. They inquire a bit more as to the situation and it's all explained by FA, how they arrived late, wanted their seats and then the whole plane had to be rearranged. Upset that one. The pilot held the plane to accommodate the anuses. 2. The anuses then asked for their seats, which caused a domino effect. And 3. It comes out that the anuses are in fact the pilot's family, brother or something, which caused him to hold the plane in the first place. They ask that the anuses leave the plane immediately because you should have never been on this plane from the beginning. Reprimand the pilot for abusing his position and indirectly causing this entire fiasco, and refund my father's ticket because of the absurd requests by the anuses. The plane finally takes off 2.5 hours later. My father has a full refund, about $500, and the anuses have to wait for the next flight. This was all at 11 p.m. Good flight? I think so. The last one is titled, Pride Comes Before a Fall. Background. In the area where I live, there's this community service center, and during Halloween, we get to volunteer to take part in haunted houses. Haunted rooms would be more accurate, because there's multiple groups and we only get a large room to work our magic in, as staff members. The main visitors are around 7 to 15, meaning that our rooms have to be scary, but not too scary. The first year this happened, the workers ended up with a lot of crying kids on hand, so the years afterwards had limits on how scary it could be. Well, back in 2013, there was this 17 to 18-year-old butthead, we'll call him FA, who started coming. He kept on going into haunted houses and making really snide comments. The makeup looked obviously fake. What do you expect? We're not professionals, we're just a bunch of teenagers who want to bring the Halloween spirit alive. None of it was scary, the actors were too young, and even a room filled with fluffy pillows was scarier. Those were just some of the remarks. We weren't happy, but we shrugged and let it slide, figuring he wouldn't be back. Boy, were we wrong. 2014 rolls over, and he comes back, pulling the same crap. What's more, when he got out of the attraction, he'd tell others what was in it and ruin the entire damn thing. Come 2015, and I was team leader this year. My group mates were all dreading it because we knew he'd probably come around and do it all over again. Sure, I have a few skills I didn't show, but we can't have cards flying around and people popping out of nowhere constitute the entire house, can we? However, as a seasoned veteran, I've met quite a few people over the course of those 4 years. One of them was this guy who we'll call Tommy, and he was a whiz at woodwork. For example, on my first year doing this, 2011, we had this spot where there would be a vampire rising from the grave, which called for an actual coffin. There's no way we're buying one, and he was the one who made it from thin boards of wood, a week before the entire thing started. Planning. Now, Tommy was also a devilishly clever person who did not appreciate his experience for the past 2 years being ruined. So, he flipped a switch, and changed from his usual polite gentleman mode to his bastard-coded bastard with extra bastard filling mode, and when I contacted him asking him to join my group, he accepted, proposing a plan. During the time between 2013 and 2015, he had taken his woodwork to a whole new level. Forget the coffins, he could make a table with so many gimmicks and secrets that it would take an entire month to discover them. And he was going to do exactly that. In addition to Tommy, I had also recruited a couple of other people who had been on the receiving end of FA's douchebaggery and wanted to get back at him. Then, another group heard what we were doing and decided to join up with our team, meaning that we were given the largest room, which was at least 4 times larger than the other rooms. Our now 30-something strong group put our heads together, and we plotted. Coming up with scary sights, well beyond what we usually would do at the center. There would be no fake mannequins in place of bodies, nor would there be any tissue paper doubling as scabs and wounds. We were determined to do the best we could and give this butthole his due. For the month leading up to Halloween, we worked as hard as we could to get it all done. Recording sounds, shopping, communicating over Google Docs. We worked our butts off on it just to make sure we could deliver that karmic kick up his backside. Finally, Halloween rolled over. I met up with Tommy and several others at the center especially early, well before any of the other groups were even here. We spent the next 3 getting the place set up, and by cleverly draping up the black swathes of cloth we were provided with, we turned a large room partitioned by sliders into a labyrinthine, dark horror where we waited to give patrons the scare of their lives. After a quick lunch, the performers arrived, 4 of who were hefting a large table. Needless to say, the table attracted quite a few stares. Holy crap, what the hell is that? Oh, just a surprise that we have in store for the sucker. Tommy gave the people asking his signature "I'm about to wreck some serious" grin. As the hours rolled by, our justice squad labored like an army of ants. The makeup artists started working their magic, and slowly, horrific injuries bloomed on our actors. From gashes to scars, from flesh rotted away to reveal bones to mangled limbs and missing chunks of flesh, they either looked like they just came out of an accident, or could pass themselves off as the freshly reawakened dead, come back to haunt the living. Alright, I might have exaggerated a bit, but you get the idea. Meanwhile, back in the haunted room, we went and, having checked that it was partitioned like we wanted and all the decorations were here, started laying out everything needed. First, we divided the materials based on what went into which section. Then, we all split apart and decorated the sections we were responsible for, before converging again at the table, which Tommy had decorated while we weren't around. Tommy turns to me, a smirk adorning his face. Lux, should we tell them about the table? I nod, and Tommy grins. So guys, as you can see, there's several dishes, silverware and those fancy lids all laid out on the table, right? Cue a round of uncertain nods. Tommy reaches over, lifts up one of the lids, and everyone is greeted with a head on a plate. Eyes closed, shaven head, blood around the neck. Then, the head opens their eyes and lets out a shriek. Pandemonium ensues. The rest of the team let out yells of alarm as the head, laughing, disappears from view. Moments later, the head with the body attached crawls out from under the table, before revealing that the plate was not actually a plate but was painted on the cloth itself. Peering over reveals a hole in both the cloth and the table itself, with 2 slats near the bottom of the table. These slats were movable, so the actor portraying the head could slide the slats apart, stick his head through the hole, then slide them back to complete the illusion. A little further along the table, there's a similar but smaller mechanism for someone else to do the same with their arm, and on top of that hole we plopped on a pile of fake arms, before drizzling them with a ton of fake blood to camouflage the arm. Fast forward a couple hours, and it's now 30 minutes before game time. The actors have all sated their hunger, and have also run through the entire thing a couple of times. Now, they're just chatting and mooching around. Tommy and I are worried though. What if FA doesn't turn up and all our work was in vain? I sneak out and hide behind one of the numerous veils hung up in the hallway leading to the corridor with rooms, where the visitors are gathered. And from my vantage point, among our sea of faces, I spot a familiar one. Jackpot. I run back as quickly and quietly as I can, telling Tommy. Tommy literally jumps up from his seat, and calls everyone together. He tells them to relieve themselves, put their stuff away and get their crap sorted out, because they're going to start business. 5 minutes before opening, everyone's getting into position and exchanging small talk. I myself am tying one of the makeup artists to a railing. She volunteered to be one of the victims in a slaughterhouse scare zone when we hear commotion outside. I go out to take a look, and see FA, as well as some of his scumbag friends, trash-talking the team leaders of one of the other haunted rooms. I step in and tell him to duck off, and he responds by going, "Yeah, I'm not scared of your stupid attraction. I saw how lame it was last year. Let's see you say that after you get through it." Revenge. The haunted rooms event lasts for 2-3 if there's a lot of people, hours, and during this time, we got several visitors. We gave them the normal version of the journey, where we don't pull off the really horrible tricks yet. Those are reserved for a certain jerkwad. The journey also varies slightly with each one. We arrange the partitions so that we can have more than one potential route. For example, certain rooms are skipped out if there are young children, like the Mad Slaughterhouse. The order of rooms shown is mixed around, and sometimes the rooms are not seen, but heard. It's never really the same with our house. After around an hour of scaring, we get a little rest break. The lights are on, the windows on the door are covered with black pieces of paper, and we're all chilling. Then, there is loud rapping on the door. I move one of the pieces aside, and see FA pounding on the door, his cohorts snickering as well. We were upset. I mean, who the hell does that? We decide, duck it, if he won't treat us with respect, then we won't hold back on him either. The guy at the door tells them to be more patient and that they would get to go in as soon as they, as scarers, were ready. They lay off the knocking, and we spend the rest of the break preparing for his arrival. The only thing FA and co. saw were 1 or 2 of us running out to the toilets and getting some water. Finally, the trap was set. FA and his friends swagger in, completely unaware of what lay in wait for them like a suckerfish to bait. The first thing they noticed was the mist, drifting out of a cauldron. The actress, who is playing the role of a hideous old crone, is faced away from them, hunched over and muttering stuff. She turns to them, and tells them the story, with a twist. Instead of the usual introduction to how they should make sure to obey the rules, she just says something about how they should be careful, for dark things, evil things, lurk ahead. Enter at your risk. FA and co. shrug, and walk on through the shroud of mist, formed by the CO2 pouring from the buckets above. Now this is where it starts to diverge from the normal path. Remember my skills? Because as soon as they clear the veil, the first thing they see are several cards coming at them at as high a speed as I could make them. Of course, I aim to miss, but barely, and so that it whooshes past their head. What the hell was that? Cohort number 1 asks. Oh, man up. I was right, this is still lame. FA laughs. But is that a slight silver of anxiety I hear in your voice? Well, they got through most of the attractions. I think they started to crack when they got to the mad slaughterhouse. There was fake blood and actual pig organs in there, as well as a couple of people playing victims, and from there on it only got worse and worse. By the time they get to the dining hall, they're starting to shake and sweat visibly. The butler, played by Tommy, invites them to sit down and, ignoring their sounds of protest, shows them to their seats. Then, he takes out a silver bell and rings it, and lo and behold, the fly-covered people with their heads resting in plates of rotting food come alive. Blinking dazedly, they look around, blank looks in their eyes. I think I saw one of the friends visibly pale when a zombie stared them in the eye. Tommy lifts open some of the covers on the dishes. Roasted fingernails, bug salad drizzled with rainwater vinegar, boiled heart, yes it was a real pig's heart, earthworm pudding. Tommy took great pleasure in describing each and every one of the dishes in graphic detail, taking pleasure in making the ducker squirm. Then, after all that fuss, only one lid remains uncovered. At this, Tommy puts on an air of excitement, rubbing his hands and muttering to himself how the last dish would give them the greatest surprise of their lives. The zombies moan and groan, taking the cutlery and thumping on the desk with it. Tommy slowly, agonizingly takes hold of the lid, and the thumps get more and more frantic. Finally, in one swift movement, Tommy yanks the cover away, and yells, "Behold!" FA and his cohorts catch sight of a pale, shaven head, with blood around the neck. But only for a second, because the next second, the head has opened their eyes, and let out an unearthly shriek. And unfortunately for FA, Tommy sat him down so that when the head comes alive, they are facing his seat, looking right into his eyes. What ensued was possibly the most glorious moments of my life. FA and his friends let out loud screams of their own, and knock over their chairs in their haste to get out. However, a real arm snakes out from the pile of arms and swipes at them, making them scream even louder, the zombies moaning. Tommy yells, "I hope you enjoyed your dinner," as they run past. They're in the last room now. They're looking around, and they can't see the door, which is covered by a black curtain. I wait until they're looking in the wrong direction, then quietly draw back the curtain and hide. When they see it, they practically stumbled towards it. They're so focused on the door, they don't notice me sneaking out of my hiding spot and assuming a position near the door. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Mad cackling. I still remember the surprised yelps they let out when I made my audio debut. Needless to say, after being on the receiving end of what we call the Great Scare of 2015, he never tried to stir up any trouble for the rest of the time he was here. Thanks for listening.